Am I wrong for no longer speaking to my dad and aunt for what they did to me and my grandmother when my grandfather died before starting anything? Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We will provide best quality content on regular basis. Also like, share and express your opinion in comment box. So, I apologize, this is going to be long and possibly hard to understand. For context, this was many years ago now when I was in my early 20s, but it has always bothered me and I never talk about it. There are a lot of details here, so apologies again. I was sort of raised by my grandparents. I didn't really have a relationship with my aunt growing up because she didn't get along with my grandma, and my relationship with my dad was limited. When I turned 18, I wanted to get to know them better. And it turns out we got along pretty well. I started seeing them on the holidays and then we started hanging out every other Saturday night. We were really close, I loved them, I genuinely felt like I had a connection with my family for once. This didn't bother other family members either. Now, when I had graduated, my grandfather bought me a car and was going to transfer the title to me as a birthday present. We never got around to it. In the meantime, I took care of it like it was in my name. Always paid for gas, oil, tires, all of the upkeep no matter what it was. I wanted to keep it in perfect condition since technically it wasn't mine. I was also on my grandfather's car insurance and also paid him for it too, since it was too expensive for me to afford a policy of my own with my low-paying job. Then, my grandfather died. I've had the car for a few years at this point. My grandfather did not have a will. My father became the executor automatically since technically my grandfather and grandmother never got married on paper, but my dad didn't want the responsibility and gave it over to my aunt to deal with. Now up to this point, the day he died, I'm obviously still on good terms with my dad and aunt. We were even texting each other right up to the night before he died. I still have the texts even. She was asking me how I was, complete with little heart emojis. I don't hear from either of them the day he dies, even though I reached out to them. I tried to talk to them, no one would answer. At the same time, I didn't want to bombard them with texts since I knew they were probably grieving and trying to figure things out. At this point I realized Grandpa had no will and the car wasn't in my name and I probably shouldn't be driving it. I found out from my grandmother that my aunt had cancelled the insurance policy. I didn't want to drive it with no title and no insurance. It was my only way to and from work and I was now without transportation and was worried about losing my job, and I didn't really have the money to just go out and buy a new car right then and there. Didn't even know the first thing about buying a car, didn't even know if I could afford a car payment. I also didn't want to just jump the gun and buy a car since it would have just made more sense for me to keep mine. Just a week before I had new tires put on, new oil, an alignment, and even new windshield wipers, and also paid my grandfather for the next 6 months of our policy. I had blown a lot of money on it. I asked my aunt if I could outright pay her for what the car was worth and whatever inheritance tax came with it, even though it would have blown the small amount of savings I had, or if she wanted the car outright. I offered to do whatever she wanted me to do and I would figure out my own car situation later, even if I was without transport, could have lost my job, etc. I told her I understood she was probably grieving, asked her if she needed any help. She finally texted me back for the first time in days and said, "I do not want nor need your money." It was really weird to hear her talk like that. More days go by, still don't hear anything from her. I never knew when they were home, and didn't want to just dump the car at one of their houses with the keys in it in case something happened to it. I still didn't drive the car, and bummed rides from my boyfriend to work, which was difficult because we started and ended work at different times, and he was having car trouble at the time too. He even ended up having to get a rental. I tried reaching out to my dad again to ask what to do. He said it was my problem, told me to grow a pair of balls and deal with my aunt, and then ignored me after that. The next day my aunt called me and cursed me out completely out of the blue, telling me if I didn't drop the car off at her house that very day, she would have me arrested. She was screaming at the top of her lungs, calling me a CNT, every name in the book, and that she was going to have the car registered as stolen. This came out of completely nowhere. I very obviously tried to pay her, give her the car back. I obviously did not steal the car. I had maintenance records with my name on them that went years back. Regardless, I immediately drove the car to her house and left it there and handed her the keys. She slammed the door in my face and told me to have a nice life. I was devastated. I seriously don't know what I did. A few weeks went by and the police showed up at our house. I had to go to the station and they accused me of vandalizing the car. I was dumbfounded. I had taken pictures of the car the night I gave it back to her, because someone told me to, just in case something happened to the car and I got blamed. Go figure. The cops showed me pictures of the car and it had obviously been keyed. I gave all of the pictures to the cops and had to have multiple family members and friends come down to give witness statements that the car was not damaged when I returned it to her, and I would have never done that to my own car that I always took care of. Thankfully nothing came of this. Now on to my grandmother. Her and my grandfather were together for almost 40 years. She adopted my dad and aunt when their birth mom abandoned them. So obviously they spent a lot of their life together. My aunt got lawyers and a constable to go to my grandmother's house and took every last thing of my grandfather's. And when I say everything, I do mean everything. I had to help my grandmother, alone, pack every single belonging of his into boxes and label them with lists. My aunt wanted every last thing, right down to his last pair of boxers. My dad stood by and let my aunt berate her the whole time. My grandmother was left with not a single thing to remember him by. I could handle them treating me terribly but couldn't handle watching them treat her like that. My aunt has even tried to bring my grandmother to court for a missing power tool my grandfather supposedly had at some point but sold years ago. It was extremely petty and sad. I never spoke to them after that day. I was disgusted that they would treat me so nicely for years and then turn on me in a day's time for no reason, and I was disgusted that they would treat my grandmother like that, a woman who took them in and always cared for them. My grandmother had a good relationship with my dad this whole time too, right up until the day my grandfather died. It was bizarre how they turned on a dime, and to this day I still don't understand why they acted the way they did and am still kind of horrified about it all. I know from a legal standpoint, since my grandfather didn't have a will, this was all perfectly fine for them to do. But why try to get me arrested charged when I was completely cooperating with her? I even found out from a different aunt she has been telling people that if I had just paid her for the car, she would have let me keep it, and a few other extremely disturbing rumors about my personal issues. Why I have all of the texts from her proving that was a lie. I should also note that when my aunt took my car, she also had 2 cars of her own, including a sports car, a motorcycle, and a truck she inherited from my grandfather. So she was not lacking in transportation. I miss the days with my aunt and dad. We always had a good time. Now I'm just wondering, did I do anything wrong here? Am I wrong for not talking to them? Still on top of all of this, when my grandfather died, my aunt had him cremated and none of us got any of his ashes. I feel like my aunt was really the main culprit behind all of this, and I feel like I could reach out to my dad, but I'm still disgusted by what they did to my grandma. My dad's wife also divorced him after this whole situation, and according to some people he now has nobody. I hate the thought of my dad being sad and alone, but he also dug a massive hole by treating everyone around him like garbage and letting his sister bully his only child and his adoptive mother. Should I try to talk to my dad or just leave this whole situation in the past? Any advice is appreciated. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel for watching more interesting videos.